Okay.
Atlantic Tactical. What did I buy from Atlantic Tactical?
$38,000. Holy shit.
Son of a biscuit. Looks like some ammo I ordered over a year ago is finally being fulfilled.
Wow.
And if I can only see what it is.
Hopefully you still have a gun that shoots it.
Yeah, right. Subsonic 9mm. Okay. Should be 500 rounds of subsonic 9mm. I need that for competition. I shoot the subsonic through the suppressors.
Okay. You good for next Thursday, the 23rd?
Sir, I'm good for every Thursday until you tell me you don't want me anymore.
All right. Well, I don't want you on the 30th because I'm going to be on the road.
Gotcha.
But the 23rd and every other Thursday, I'll take you.
We do whatever you want. We can do a little 5-minute update after we do the regular one. You can record it and drop it that day. You do whatever you want. I'm willing to do anything. I'm easy.
Well, we may have to. What time are you getting into Dallas on that week?
Let me see. Check my flight right now. Let you know. Travel. I think we're doing Spirit out. Manage travel. Continue. Allow. Accept. Sign in. It's like an 18-step process to check this.
That's why I always poured everything over to Google Calendar.
You know, I usually download it all like into my calendar and all that, and then every time I go look for it, it's like wrong year or just not there. I'm like, hey, what are you talking about? It's just all right. Let's see, my trips. There we go. September 30th. Let's take a look at that one. That's the trip we're talking about. All right. It is. I depart at 7:40. So 6:46. Yeah, I'll be. I could do anything. Let's see, Paul. I've got it's 7:40, so I've got to be there by 5:40. I'd have to be done by 5 recording because I'm taking guns, so I got to get there 2 hours early. So I could do earlier in the day Thursday if you wanted to record something, or any other day.
I'm thinking when we're in because I'm thinking.
I'm sorry. I get in there at I get in at 9:38 p.m. That was the question, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that'll be too late because I'll.
Okay.
No, at 38 Thursday is when you get in.
Yes.
Okay, so Friday afternoon / evening, we can probably throw one out quickly.
Yep.
I can just bring along my tripod for my cell phone. We can set the tripod up somewhere, and I'll knock back a Diet Dew and buy you a adult beverage, and we can.
There we go.
I
Sounds good.
Since my stroke, I don't consume alcohol any longer. The stroke.
I would expect you would be following the doctor's directions.
Yeah, the stroke
And it sounds like that's what you're doing.
I don't need to help it along anymore.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, we still got time. We're still almost 9 minutes out. So,
Yep.
check and make sure. Yep, that's all good there. Check my switches. Yep, that's all good. All right. All right. Let me pull up that article. I'm trying to remember the city that happened in, and it left my brain.
What's that, today's story?
The story I sent you.
Waterbury, Connecticut.
Waterbury. Okay. I sincerely hope that the person that happened to, the state of Connecticut owes him so much money that he never has to work another day in his life, and that the former cop owes that guy so much money that he has to send that guy half of his McDonald's paycheck for the rest of his life. And the guy's so stinking rich, he can make YouTube videos lighting the checks on fire so the guy can cry as he watches the YouTube videos of his paycheck, of his checks being burned.
Listen, I have an awful lot. I get asked about qualified immunity an awful lot. So when you sent that one to me today, I was like, yeah, yes, good story.
this guy should never have been a cop. It used to be 20 years ago, you had to pass, I mean, at least in Sioux Falls, I had a good friend that tried to become a Sioux Falls police officer. You had to pass a psychological test to become a cop. They wouldn't hire just anybody. And this guy should have never. I don't know if they still make cops pass psych tests, but this guy should have never, ever, ever passed one.
And I will save my comments for on the air so
Yeah.
you and I can have an awesome dialogue, because trust me, I'm not going to fight, Paul, but I like to. I listen. Here's how the end of this goes. I agree with you,
Okay.
but when it comes to qualified immunity, I like the listener to understand what was in the cop's mind, whether it was right or wrong. And at the end of this, Paul, I'm going to tell you what was in the cop's mind was wrong. Obviously.
Okay.
But I've got a unique way to approach this. So
Sure.
that's all I'll say. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool.
But I agree with you. Yeah.
I've been holding back.
We'll end up on the same page at the end of this.
I think we will too.
Yeah. Oh, I know we will. Yeah.
But I'm going to insert Paul Lathrop's opinion too, not Second Amendment Foundation's opinion. I'm going to insert Paul Lathrop's opinion as we get into it. And
Hold on. Your volume's low.
let me see. Let me see if I can do some adjusting here. Just a minute. Audio test, audio check, 1, 2. Any better?
Yeah, it's a lot lower than mine. So as long as you don't hear me feeding back when I'm talking to you, I'm okay.
No, I don't hear you. I hear you once, not twice, is what I'm trying to say. And I don't hear me
You're coming
feeding
in-
back.
Okay. I don't hear me feeding back or echoing, but my level and your level are a lot different. I'm trying to bring yours up, and hold on, let me bring mine. If I bring mine down, though, it's going to be that I'm coming to you less. All right, try again.
Audio check, audio test, 1, 2. Hi,
Audio
welcome
test,
to
audio
another
check, 1,
edition
2.
of the Daily Bullet.
Okay, well, now we're even. I got it fixed on mine. Thank you.
All right, no problem.
I had to have it turned up for what I was doing with Craig earlier.
Okay.
So it's all good, all good, all good.
All right. Coming up on 30 seconds, going to throw the logo up. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Daily Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today, as he does every Thursday, Mike Piwowarski. Mike is with Arms Room Radio and The Rundown. Mike, thanks for joining me today, man.
Paul, it's a pleasure. I love doing this. I love being with you every Thursday, and we're going to have a good time today. We got ourselves another great topic. They keep delivering themselves on our doorsteps every Thursday morning.
Yeah, absolutely we do. This one is a bit of a win. Came across this story yesterday. A bit of a kerfuffle in Connecticut. This happened last fall. A concealed carry permit holder was pulled over, did exactly what he should have said. Officer, I have a concealed carry permit. Here it is. The gun is in the door pocket of my door. Officer pulls him out of the car, throws him on the ground, cuffs him, puts him in the back of the cruiser, and then proceeds to search his car, runs him downtown, and after searching him and his car, says he has drugs on him. Well, he did. He has the same drugs that I carry with me everywhere I go because my doctor says I have to. The guy had nitroglycerin pills on him. And it turns out, after a whole lot of legal wrangling, it came down earlier this week. The judge says the officer, the former officer, I hope, is not covered by qualified immunity. The officer had no reason to do what he did, and a normal, reasonable officer, the judge ordered, would not have did what this officer did.
Yeah, listen, folks, we're talking qualified immunity with you here, and I want to give you some definitions, give you some history, and then we'll get into this case here out of Waterbury, Connecticut. We've had many discussions over qualified immunities come up over the past 2 years, 3 years when dealing with law enforcement. Derek Chauvin being one of them. Obviously, we know what happened up in Minnesota and many other law enforcement officers around the country. Qualified immunity is basically, it says that a law enforcement officer has immunity unless they violate the law or your constitutional rights. Okay? So let's be clear on that. The officer receives immunity unless they violate the law or your constitutional rights. Now, why is that needed? Because let's say the police officer pulls you over, Paul. Let's say this had gone the opposite way. He had pulled him over, said he had his driver's license, said he had his firearm. The officer gave him a ticket, for speeding, and then he was on his way. And then this gentleman that got the ticket files a lawsuit for a violation of Fourth Amendment rights because he kept them there, and now we know the officer did nothing wrong, but that lawsuit would be allowed to go through all the way to the point of even maybe taking money and awarding damages against the officer. So qualified immunity protects the officers when they do things the right way, when they do not violate the law, and when they do not violate a constitutional right. All right, and that's what that's designed for. That this goes back to, this is kind of weird, most people don't realize this, the case is Harlow versus Fitzgerald. It's a 1982 Supreme Court case, which actually stems from, oddly enough, it was two presidential aides of President Nixon that had a lawsuit filed against them by Mr. Fitzgerald, who had whistleblower. There was no whistleblower protection then, so he filed lawsuit against them because when Fitzgerald exposed some items going on in the White House or in the administration against these two aides, they fired him for it. And it had not been decided at that point what presidential aides, what level of protection they had. So there's two levels of protection out there: absolute immunity and qualified immunity. And this comes from the Harlow case from 1982. Law enforcement officers have qualified immunity. Those with absolute immunity are like your elected legislators, elected officials, chief executives of the branch, like the president or the justices themselves, or prosecutors is another one that have absolute immunity, unless it's a gross negligence on their part. For the most part, it defaults to absolute immunity. Now, qualified immunity is the cabinet members, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Agriculture, Department of Health, everything. They have qualified immunity because they're not elected officials. The police officer is not an elected official; they're an appointed or hired official. They depending on what agency you're from, is whether they're hired or appointed, but they are not elected officials. Now, law enforcement officers for a long time have had that qualified immunity. I will tell you this: there have been numerous courts out there that have gotten this wrong over the past 20, 30 years. They do not apply qualified immunity correctly. Qualified immunity is supposed to apply to the individual and individual actions alone. What normally happens is somebody will file a lawsuit against the officer, the chief, and the agency. And the officer is the only one that's supposed to have qualified immunity on their side. Mm-hmm. But many of the courts will decide, well, we can't separate them, or for whatever reason they want, and they dismiss the whole thing. That's wrong. It's erroneous. What we should be doing, rather than trying to get rid of qualified immunity, is making sure judges know how to enforce it correctly. I have no problem with qualified immunity. In this case, Paul, it actually is a perfect example of when and how qualified immunity works. This guy screwed the pooch. Officer Andrzejewski screwed the pooch out there. He did wrong. He broke the law. He violated this gentleman, Mr. Sukene's constitutional rights, and now he's been found at fault. He's been found guilty. Well, it's not guilty. It's a civil court. He's been found at fault, for violating the rights and breaking the law against the victim here, Mr. Sukene. But again, just to jump back just a hair, there's qualified immunity, and I think we should look at taking a lot of these elected officials, these judges, these executives, let's say like your city council members, your state legislatures, when they go out, Paul, and they absolutely create a law that's a violation of the Second Amendment, but because they have absolute immunity, they have no repercussions coming to them. They should have qualified immunity as well. When they stand up and say, I know this is wrong and we're not supposed to do this, but I'm doing it because I feel like it's the right thing. That's enough to breach the veil, and they should lose absolute immunity and be sued under qualified immunity.
I agree totally. I'm going to get a couple comments in here. Robert says these are Gestapo tactics. I totally agree. He says once he's cuffed, there's no reason for a search without a warrant. Again, and he says of the car. Absolutely. You got once he's cuffed, you got time to get that warrant.
Now hold on. Let me go into this a little bit with you now, because I've got 21 years experience with this, and I want to say, listen, you just heard me defend qualified immunity when used correctly, when tried correctly, when sued correctly. This officer, and we see this in a lot of places. We see this in a lot of places, Paul, where there's no open carry. Now the 4 remaining states where there's no open carry, all law enforcement officers in those states have been taught for years and years and years that all guns are bad. All guns are bad. Whether the guy's got a permit, whether it's an open carry, whether it's a concealed carry, they've been taught all guns are bad. There was a time in law enforcement in the late 80s, early 90s where that was all that was taught in every academy, all guns are bad. And there's still guys out there that have that opinion, have that feeling that all guns are bad. So when they see this person, this Mr. Sukene, when he says, I have a firearm, well, Officer Andrzejewski here, what went wrong? As far as a warrant is needed, if the arrest is justified, if the detention is justified, well then I don't need a warrant really to go in the car, because I'm going to be towing the car and I have to do an inventory of the vehicle, no matter what. You're not going to leave the vehicle on the side of the road. It's on a public street, on a public roadway. You can't leave it. You have to take the vehicle and secure it, because otherwise you're liable if something happens. So you're not searching the vehicle at that point, but you're doing an inventory of it before you put it into safekeeping in the impound yard. So, and I'm not trying to get into a search warrant debate with anyone at all. This officer was wrong. This officer treated this man horribly. This officer put a man on the ground. Look, Paul, I'm going to guess, I don't know his age, but if he's got nitro pills, I'm betting he's not 21 years old. Okay, I'm betting the guy is probably up there in a couple of years, and it has the, you throw him on the ground when he tells you what the problem is. He tells you he has the firearm. He doesn't show you the firearm. Listen, I've seen jack wagons do that too. By the way, officer, I have a gun. I just want to let you know.
Oh, by the way,
guess what you're going to get? Yeah, you're going to get a gun in the ear when you do that. Okay. And I will always recommend to let the officer know, because you don't want them to accidentally find out you have it, as opposed to letting them know. Now the risk with that is you get Officer Andrzejewski here, who puts you down. Now, Paul, I don't know if he's going to lose his job. We'd have to know what his previous service record at that agency is. You'll have this happen all the time, where they'll be found in violation of a law, in violation of a policy, in violation of a civil right, and yet they won't be dismissed from the agency. And listen, unfortunately, the people of Waterbury, the state of Connecticut, are going to be the ones that end up paying through the insurance that the police department has. And if they don't have insurance and they're self-insured, it's going to come out of the taxes of the citizens of Waterbury.
I sincerely hope that the person that this happened to, that the city of Waterbury and the state of Connecticut, because that's what authority this officer had, was acting under, I sincerely hope they owe this person enough that he never has to work another day in his life, and his children never have to work a day in their lives. I mean, I want this guy to be totally and completely rich. I want the former officer that now has to work at McDonald's because that's the only job that he can get anymore. I want him to have to give this guy half his paycheck for the rest of his life. And I want this guy to be so rich that he can do what Elon Musk, roll that check up and burn it in a YouTube video so this guy can sit there and cry watching the YouTube video, seeing his check go up in flames. That's what I want to happen. Want to get a couple of comments in here. The Facebook side the comments are just flying. Jeff Goodrich, when this came in while you were going over the commentary about the officer, absolutely correct. Angela Becker says she totally agrees. Diane Houston, great point. They're lucky the man didn't go into cardiac arrest.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, because if a good prosecutor comes along and this man goes into cardiac arrest while this officer's breaking the law, he could be facing a felony murder charge.
Yeah, absolutely. John Lachina, we don't know the answer to this, John. Were the RX in a pill script container? Don't know, but I can show you that when you have, and I've got them right here with me. I carry them with me everywhere I go.
Most nitro pills, right? Yeah, show them, Paul.
It's a very distinct container. It's hard to miss this container.
Yeah,
and so
a lot of nitro pills will come in a 1 or 2 capsule container. You buy the specialty containers, and they look like, I don't know, pen caps or something like that. You could slip it in a pocket. They're very well protected, so the pills don't get crushed because they are a liquid-based pill. But most of the nitro pills I've run into, when people are out and about, it's not in the original prescription container, which is probably why the officer made note of it, that he found, drugs. If he had said he had found nitro pills with his name on it, that shouldn't have been an issue. Although this officer seemed to have a lot of problems with what reasonable is and what unreasonable is.
Yeah, my nitro pills.
To be clear, listen.
Go ahead.
We talked about when you mentioned that Judge Janet Bond Atherton there in Connecticut. She did a great job. She did a great summary with her opinion. Listen, and how do you figure out what qualified immunity is? The standard that they use is the reasonable officer standard. There's a reasonable person standard, the common person standard. Well, that's the same as but applied to law enforcement. It says if it's clear to a reasonable officer that the conduct in this situation was unlawful, it would have been clear to anyone. This officer, when he tried to continue to argue that there was a firearm, I had the right to do this. There was a firearm, I had the right to do this. She just said, you just told me you got his firearms permit. You didn't say anything about the firearm being exposed, the firearm being pointed at you. He simply told you there was a firearm in the car, and you overreacted because, there was a firearm in the car. Now, Paul, listen, and again, this is where I'm going to step back and I'm going to say, let's look at his record ahead of time. For all I know, Paul, the day before, this cop may have had a gun pointed at his head, okay, and might have, and his officials his bosses may not have recognized that, and may not have taken him off the road when they should have, and gotten him the help and care that he should have. Which is why I won't go as far as you say, Paul, and say let's fire him and his family, because I want to know the background. I also want to go, and if I was the prosecutor in this county, I would order the police department to turn over all of their training records concerning how to deal with citizens with firearms. Because if this cop has been taught this since day one, yes, he should know the law is wrong. But every day, if he's been taught this for 10 years, 15 years, we need to start talking about where liability rests, as opposed to with the officer that did what he was told. Did he break the law? We know that he broke the law. Okay, that's clear. But let's spread liability around if it deserves to be spread around.
I'm gonna stand right there with you on that. That's reasonable, and I'm consider myself a reasonable man. Our good buddy, and you work with this guy every once in a while, Craig DeLuz, just checking in. And Robert thinks I probably shouldn't hold back quite so much when I go off.
Feel free to release.
Yeah, but here's my concern. And now I have a good friend that back in the late '80s, early '90s, he wanted to become a law enforcement officer and tried to get onto the Sioux Falls Police Department. I never had the desire to become a police officer, but I know through my friendship with this guy that part of becoming a police officer in Sioux Falls, you had to go through a psychiatric evaluation, and it was a pretty stringent one. And even with that, there were then and there are now police who I call badges. Once they become an officer, that's their life. And because they've got that badge, when they are in the car, they control everything around them. And by God, if they've pulled you over, you better yes, sir, and no, sir, them, or yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, them. And if you don't, they're going to make your life hell. And they'll do it under the color of law. Unfortunately, those people make it into the police department. There needs to be a way for them to go out of the police department just as easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I don't have any problem with that, Paul. I could tell you from late 80s, early 90s, there was hiring shortages. Standards were lowered. You had affirmative action still going on. You had reverse discrimination at some points even going on, where you had the halting of qualified, for lack of trying to be politically proper here. You weren't allowed to hire white people for 2 years in many agencies because of their hiring practices for many years, and they had to hire minorities. Well, they had to hire so many of them that they had to lower standards, because you may have been able to hire that many minorities over the normal course of 4 or 5 years, but when you want to get them all in 2 years, you had to lower the standards. Listen, the military does this too. We did it in Iraq when we had the surge. We didn't have enough people to go over. You lower some of the recruiting standards. Okay, we're not worried about what happened before. Let's get you over there, right? And we all end up paying for that in the future. We might be paying for this now. Again, I'll just say about Officer Andrzejewski here, I want to see what his week was like leading up to this. Is this an agency that's working these guys 70, 80 hours a week because they've had other resignations? Did they tell him if he wants to take a day off, he's going to be fired? I want to know what's going on in this agency as well. I'm not going to crucify the man when he's got a whole team of people behind him that should have known what was going on, or maybe even caused it.
Yeah, again, and that's being fair, and I can get behind that, absolutely. I want to get this comment in. And this is one of these probably going to take us on a side trip, but that's okay. Daniel Huffman says, a guy I worked with is a hardcore anti-gun Democrat. Worked on changing him for 2 years. He finally went to the range with me and fell in love with my AR. Now he's going to the local gun store every week and got his wife and daughter into shooting. That's awesome, Daniel. And that is the primary way we're gonna change people's minds. Is you become friends. You become friends with people, and you get them to go to the range with you.
Now, Daniel, I want you to go back to him, and when you're at the range, I want you to grab his bag with his AR in it and tell him he can't have it anymore because the guy outside doesn't like it. And make sure he understands what you're doing, okay? Because it's one thing to be somebody that appreciates a firearm and likes target shooting. But if you want to bring them to the Second Amendment community, and that's the only community that matters to me, because that's the one that protects my gun rights, and that's the one that protects everything that I have that I could protect my family with. Tell him about the Second Amendment. You've got him on the guns. You got the hook in. Now it's time to set it, okay?
The other thing I'd like you to do, Daniel, is to give him the link and have him tune into this show every once in a while. Especially have him tune in not this coming weekend, but the following weekend when it's going to be Gun Rights Policy Conference. That's going into the deep end. That's going into an Olympic-sized swimming pool of gun rights right there. Going back.
Yeah, that's coming up soon. That's coming up soon, isn't it? We've got that, and then we've got AMCON the week after that, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Going back into the Connecticut case, John Lloyd Scharf over on the Facebook side says U.S. Code 242, deprivation of rights under color of law is a felony, not civil action. Charge him with a crime.
We're talking about qualified immunity, which is a civil charge under Harlow versus Fitzgerald. Okay. You can, most of the time, U.S. Code 242 is used for let's talk about the Rodney King incident. Okay, when the cops, under the color of law, there said they were trying to apprehend Rodney King, yet they continued to beat him. This is when you hear about major civil rights violations when they're going. That's what that's used for. All right, there's already something in place, qualified immunity under the federal side that can be used. It's a civil portion. So can that be used? Sure. If this guy had died, Paul, we'd be looking at Section 242 there.
And that's Derek Chauvin. That's the officer in Minneapolis. That's what
exactly right.
Yes.
And Derek Chauvin, he may still be tried under civil rights violations. We'll see how that goes. They've got plenty of time to do that.
Matter of fact, this morning I heard on the headline news on the radio that for a different case he's being arraigned when for holding a different person that lived, but he held that person under a similar restraint, and he's being charged criminally in that one today. So
I did see that. It was a woman from about 3-4 years before this incident that we're talking about, where he died. So
yeah, that's a whole other can of worms, that one.
Yeah, listen, and I could go on. We could talk about that for the whole week about what happened there and what happened with their agency and where their agency went wrong. Did Derek Chauvin, was he responsible for that man's death? He absolutely was. But everybody seems to be letting the agency off here, and yet I could clearly do a Google search and show you where he did what was in his policy manual.
If you're doing what you're trained to do, your department should back you up, you would think. Well, and again,
yeah, and we saw his.
This goes back to what we were just talking about. If the department trained this guy we were talking about a few minutes ago, if you know there's a gun there, take the guy out of the car, put him on the ground, get him in cuffs, and put him in a cruiser. If that's what he was trained to do, if that's what the department's policy was, then he should have immunity. Right?
Yeah, I don't know that he should have that immunity. I think they should both be subject to being liable for that. If he violated the law, again, we can use the Nuremberg defense, right? I was following orders. You still should have known that that's wrong. You have a basic understanding of the law, having been a law enforcement officer. At some point, something in your brain should have clicked and said, I've got a gun permit. Well, let me get him on the ground because it's dangerous. What? I'm sorry, what? That's not quite right.
I'm a card-carrying good guy.
I want to know the atmosphere in that department, though,
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. The comments have kind of dried up a little bit here, so anything else we should be talking about today, man?
Well, you know what? We got AmCon coming up. Let's make sure everybody knows how to follow you and look at AmCon as well, because that's a great one. And then GRPC as well. I think we should be plugging them here at the end of the show as well.
Yeah, Gun Rights Policy Conference. It's, again, not this weekend. It's a weekend after this one. And that is, they've been planning this one. I'm not kidding you. They were planning it back when I went to the home office last November. The planning was already underway.
Right.
And it's held every September. Last year it had to be virtual. This year, because of the Delta variant and all that good stuff, it has to be virtual again, because this thing is huge. The last time we had it in person in Phoenix, there were 1,000 people there. And it was every year, it's the who's who. The people, Mike, you speak there almost every year. The people that are making a difference in gun rights, the people that are making things happen, go and talk and let people know how they're making things happen. And my understanding is this is the last year it's going to be, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, this is the last year it's going to be digital only. My understanding is that next year the plan is, Lord willing, it's going to be both in person and online again. But when this goes back to in person and online, you need to get there in person, because man, that's a thing to behold. When 1,000 people who fervently believe in gun rights all get together, that'll charge your batteries like you cannot believe. But this weekend, the next best thing is to tune in either on the SAF's Facebook page or YouTube page. Again, that's 1 week from this weekend, the 24th and 25th, or 25th and 26th. I'm sorry. Tune in, and it's like 15 hours of content they're going to be releasing. So, do you have a video in that coming out this year?
Yeah, folks, make sure you tune in. 25th, 26th. It's an extraordinary event. And like Paul said, next year, hopefully, if the Lambda variant doesn't pop its head, the politicians don't push us down again, we'll have it back live. I'm not sure where yet, but great event either way. This is the kind of thing that you could sit and in 15 hours gain about 100 hours worth of firearms Second Amendment knowledge. Let's say that Second Amendment knowledge is what we're talking about here. These are the players. These are the people that will set the course of gun rights policy making and law making for the next year.
The very first gun rights policy conference I went to was Orlando 9 or 10 years ago. And I got to walk up and shake hands and have a short conversation with Alan Gura. Alan Gura is the attorney that argued the Heller decision. Yeah. And for me, a little nobody that had this itty bitty at the time, just itty bitty tiny little podcast, and for him to take the time out of his day to talk to me, that floored me. And I've been back to everyone ever since. But now, do you have a video in this year's GRPC, Mike?
I do. I believe I'm a Sunday speaker.
Okay.
Diane, I'm a Sunday speaker.
Diane wants to know how you can watch it live. Diane, that's real easy. Same way you're watching this live. It'll be on Saturday morning. It'll come on. I believe it's going to be 9 a.m. Eastern time. Saturday morning, it'll come on. It'll go into Saturday evening, and then Sunday morning, the same thing. It'll just be on. You're watching it on Facebook. It'll be the same place. It'll come up on Facebook Live for you, Diane. And for those of you on YouTube, it'll come on the SAF's YouTube. AmCon, same thing. What AmCon is really about making Second Amendment media better. If you are a podcaster, a blogger, a YouTube creator, if you are in Second Amendment media at all, once a year we all get together and we discuss how to make each other's media better. There are some of us that are really, really good at some things, and some of us that are really good at others. And we each, speak to our strengths. And for example, one thing Mike is a really good at is he's good at your talk this year, Mike, is how to become a local expert, how to get the local media to come to you when they need somebody that knows about guns. And so that's what Mike's going to teach us about this year. We've got people that are going to be talking about marketing, how to market your product so you can make money off your media. We're going to be having people talk about all kinds of stuff this year. And wow, and I get from the Peanut Gallery, we're having a door prize. Anybody that attends, with the exception of, there's like 6 people that are not eligible, and those 6 people are those people that are on the planning committee. But if you show up for
I thought they were felons. I'm sorry. Okay.
If you show up for AmCon this year and you are in the building, somebody there is going to win either a Springfield Hellcat or a Glock 43. Well, it's one of 6 people, and Mike Piwowarski is not eligible either. So, but if you're in Second Amendment media, if you're interested in becoming Second Amendment media, go to AmCon, AMMCON.org. You can click the register link there and come see us in Dallas. That's October 2nd and 3rd. That's in 2 weeks. So, and you know what? We've blown way past the bottom of the hour. Uh-oh. What did I miss?
Is eligible.
Oh, she claims you're eligible, Mike. I'll have to make sure you're not somehow. So, all right, folks. I think that's gonna wrap it up for today. Tomorrow, Mike Uli is joining us again today, and I got somewhere around here. I've got a note what the topic's going to be, but I don't remember it off the top of my head, and I'm sorry. But come join us tomorrow, 5 p.m. Central Time, again for another edition of the Daily Bullet. Thanks for watching, everybody.